Aloha. Welcome to The Creative Life, a collaborative, continuing effort between Think Tech Hawaii and the American Creativity Association. I'm Darlene Boyd, your host for today's show. Our guest, Andrew Joslyn, joins us from his home studio in Seattle, Washington. Andrew is a contributing composer to 3 Grammy Award-winning albums and a BMI Hip Hop and Pop Award winner, orchestrator, and violinist. Andrew runs his own production studio in Seattle. He leads the Passenger String Quartet, and much more to be shared with us in today's interview. Get ready to learn more about Andrew's passion for music collaborative experiences while we gain a glimpse of the ins and outs of the music business. Welcome, Andrew Joslyn, to The Creative Life. Pleasure to have you with us today,
Thank you.
Andrew. I know that you
Thank you for having
have begun playing the violin since you were 5, and I know we're a little bit down the line. So when did you make that twist and turn from playing the violin to branching out?
Well, yeah, so my parents started me off on the violin when I was 5 years old. There was quite a bit of a family legacy to uphold on my father's side of the family. So my step grandfather started the London String Quartet, and my great aunt Carolyn was a famous violinist that she could do the Mendelssohn violin concerto and then also do the Mendelssohn piano concerto all in the same evening. So there was a very big classical tradition that my parents kind of wanted me to continue. And I studied the violin for many, many years, did it through college, through the kind of the traditional classical route. And then I got actually quite disillusioned with not necessarily classical music, but just kind of the process and the education behind it, because I kind of felt there was a lot of politics and there was a lot of, you know, the career trajectory that was available to me as a violinist was a little limiting, because I would be in an orchestra, I'd be a music teacher, or if I had the actual wherewithal and like the talent, I could be a solo violinist. But I none of those kind of seemed interesting to me. I wanted to be writing music. I wanted to be, I was drawn to music like, Roxy Music and U2 and Tears for Fears. And there was a lot of contemporary music that was really moving me in ways that I appreciated classical music, but there was something else that was drawing me further. And so in college, I actually went and joined a rock band. I did something totally out of my comfort zone. And a lot of rock musicians, they don't have sheet music, there's no charts, and I had to learn to improvise, and I had to learn to improvise quickly. So I I never really kind of looked back. But it's kind of funny because everything's kind of coming full circle now. But as a violinist, I kind of picked up the electric violin, started adding effects, and really, really exploring what it meant to be a composer and to write music in the moment. And that kind of led me down this path where I became a go-to string arranger and pop orchestrator for bands in the Pacific Northwest and beyond. And I just there's a lot of artists that I kind of started meeting, and by chance I started working with Ben Haggerty, aka Macklemore, in 2008, and became his kind of string arranger and orchestrator with every record ever since. And then that's led to many other artists along the way, and we can talk about them, but that's kind of a short abridged version of my journey when it came to classical education and the violin.
I'm sure it's a very short journey. I mean, a short and chat about your journey, but not a short journey in many respects. Maybe this is a timely place for us to give our viewers a treat and go to the video that you brought for us. So if we could call up that video.
1,000 knots while sleeping, connecting all these dots, still wishing for that perfect moment. We aren't ever happy. Those people on my television, airbrushed and flawless renditions, so happy in a modern moment. I won't ever know them. We're all living for that royal grace, that special place, that plastic heaven. We're all dreaming of that social status, human madness, obsessed with others' love. Famous called the ficklest of the foods, but we'd all feast if we could fall to our baser emotions. We aren't ever perfect. I'll just let my followers rush my feet while broadcasting my own conceit. Thank God we're all so honest. How did this ever happen? We're all living for that royal grace, that special place, that plastic heaven. We're all dreaming of that social status, human madness, so sad and all alone. Now we're all living for that royal grace, that special place, that plastic heaven. We're all dreaming of that social status, human madness, obsessed with others. We're all living for that royal grace, that special place, that plastic heaven. We're all dreaming of that social status, constant sadness, lost and cast adrift.
Andrew, those of us that study the concept of creativity find that others with our shared interests generally fall into two categories: dreamers and realists. Dreamers, as you might imagine, the sky's the limit, and realists are more conservative about their dreams. What do you consider yourself? Are you a dreamer or a combo or a realist? And what do you think is needed to succeed?
I love this question. Honestly, I think I'm a bit of a combo of the two. Maybe I'm a cusp. I started off as a dreamer, and I still believe that at my core I'm a dreamer, because there's still like so many things that I aspire to be and like where I want to be with my career and what I want to do creatively. But I think too that over time, and I think with the music industry in particular, there's a lot of tempering that happens. You kind of, especially when you work in a sense of, I do a lot of collaborative work with other artists, and when I'm writing or conducting or working with an ensemble, there's a lot of give and take. And I think with an art form such as music, you have to be a realist at times. You have to be able to allow room for other people's interpretations, their input. And I mean, especially when you're playing live, there might be a piece of music that you are especially moved by, but the audience is not. And I think it's weird. I do feel like the more and more I kind of traverse into a full-time career as a musician, I have to be a realist, because I also don't want to get burnt out, and I also don't want to become the mythological figure of the starving artist either, because I think that's such a disservice to the arts. So for myself, like, yeah, I'm a dreamer at my core, but you need to be tempered with realism to make sure that you protect yourself and your art in the long run.
Your answer to that question made me think of a quote that I heard not too long ago from someone in the music business, and perhaps you've heard this quote, that the music industry is 10% music and 90% business. Do you agree?
I would say maybe instead of business, I would say it's people management.
Uh,
You know, it's because yeah, there's you need to have a bit of a business acumen, and you need to have a little bit of forethought about your finances and everything else. But honestly, it's being able to work with other human beings. You could be the most amazing gifted guitarist like a Steve Vai, or some of these amazing musicians, but if your personality doesn't necessarily play well with others, you're really going to have a harder time collaborating, working with people, finding a team that supports you, and finding fans that will um, be enamored with you. So I all I would say is just flipping that, just instead of business being, people management, being able to be relatable as a human
I'll
being.
remember that for my next conversation with a musician. I don't know if that will happen, but tell me and our viewers a little bit about the video in terms of the production. I think they would probably, those that have viewed the video would agree that your selection of the vocalist is just rather magical. But what can you tell us about that production? It was fun too to watch.
Yeah. I almost feel like we should have given a disclaimer before we introduced the video, but yeah, so in my career and my trajectory as an artist, I started off as a violinist and then became a pop arranger and orchestrator for a lot of different artists, and I still do that full time for with BMG down in Los Angeles, but also I've worked with Leslie Odom Jr. and Judy Collins and Mark Lanigan. The list goes on and on and on. But around 2014, one thing that kind of tempered my own creativity is when I was always working within someone else's vision of their music, and I kind of felt severely limited, and I really wanted to write. I felt so driven to write my own music and my own lyrics and produce and create something that was entirely my own. And that video and that album, which was called Awake at the Bottom of the Ocean, which I released in 2017, was a culmination of all that. It was years upon years of all these varied influences, and it was such a bizarre record to put together for me, because I started off in classical, I went into hip hop, I did punk rock for a minute, I was doing world music, played with done some stuff in gospel and folk, and when you take the time to start to try and find your own voice as a creative in the middle of all this beautiful cacophony, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was exploring this weird kind of path to my own, who am I as an artist? And that video and that song Plastic Heaven was one of the first things that kind of came together on that record. That song I had written really specifically to address kind of a sickness of today's age, with this fascination, all obsession with celebrity and social media. I'm a child of the 80s. I had an Atari 2600. I didn't have a cell phone until my junior year of college, so I feel like I've kind of seen weird evolution of how to relate to people and how to meet people and how to, even as an artist, how do you reach your fans? And it's interesting because there's some amazing things that come from all this social media and everything that's happening, but it's also kind of a weird sickness. And it's something that I'm kind of hesitant and a little tentative about. So, in terms of the vocalist, Will Jordan, him and I have been working together for a number of years on various projects, and we had met through just the studio scene here in Seattle. I had worked on a song of his, and just loved his vocals, loved his writing. And, I just reached out to him and I was like, hey, I have a song. Do you want to sing it? And it was something that was very different for him, stylistically, but he was really down, and we've been collaborators ever since. So it's really exciting to see how that song came together. And then the video itself, I collaborated with a local cinematographer and director named Garrett Gibbons, and him and I came together, came up with the concept of the video to try and frame this weird, almost picturesque, picture perfect world with these, debutantes and everything else, to showcase this weird obsession people have with cell phones and social media, and and tried to speak to that in kind of this weird 1960s film-esque presentation. So there you go.
Well, that's very helpful. What do you like to do outside of music that contributes to your musicality?
I live, breathe. Music is such a ingrained part of my life that, that's such an appropriate question, because I think as a creative, people need to have additional outlets. And I think one of the biggest challenges that I have as a full-time musician is, when I first started off with music was the way it fed my being. It was a way to escape from other work and mundanity and stuff, to kind of bring enrichment to my own life. And then when it becomes a full-time career, when everything that you do, any piece of music that I touch, I have to look at it from almost a commodity sort of perspective, and that's a little bit hard, and I've been trying to figure out other ways to kind of replenish the well and kind of open things up for myself. And I actually, other ways that I've started exploring is just writing, having a journal in the morning that I'll write in, to kind of just have a stream of consciousness to let my brain not get in the way of itself critically, because that happens a lot. And also just I used to, when I was a kid, I used to doodle a lot. I was a really, really big into sketch art, and I haven't really done much of that lately, but I'm been slowly kind of eking back into that as a way to kind of let my brain kind of sort itself out in a way. But always I love music, and I find so many different disciplines within music itself that are entertaining and fun for me to do. When I'm feeling kind of blocked in my own writing, there's times I'll just do a huge string arrangement for another artist, and I'll just revel in the creative process of collaborating with them. And usually that's enough to kind of help get me excited again about my own writing, or about a new project or direction I need to go. So and the same thing too, it's like I'll do a lot of podcast scoring and scoring for film and TV, and those are almost completely different disciplines than songwriting and working with pop artists. So it's funny, because I think that there's so much offering in music that I never quite feel like I need to go elsewhere.
Well, actually, that your description and your response to this last question just reinforces a little bit that I've gotten to chat with you. You certainly do have a passion, and I just have another quick question about the video. Actually, it's a question that was brought to me just now as we're talking. And that is, how long did it take you to do the video? Overall, the production and how much of your
Yeah, well, it was Oh, well, it was it took maybe a couple of weeks of planning with Garrett and I and my management at the time, where we went through we posted on Facebook that we were looking for extras um to film in this weird idea of a music video. And so we had to, like, do a lot of prep work. We reached out and got a couple of those we got a couple of models to do the debutantes. We'd had, I think 30 plus people that volunteered their time to be extras. And then I had a fake orchestra as well, where it's all these musicians that I knew from Seattle, but they are all willing to just kind of mimic playing
You had
the song
fake
just for the sake of.
That was a fake orchestra that you, Andrew.
Yeah, well, I mean, they were all like, they knew they were all actual musicians.
Yeah.
But for the sake of the video, I put the sheet music out and I was like, we're not recording any of this audio, we're just getting these shots. And one of the references that we had was the Fantasia, the Disney, where you had the big silhouettes of these musicians up against the wall, and the conductor. And it was one of those things for me. I was like, I was pulling all these different cinematic references that I was so drawn to as a kid, and I was like, I kind of want to bring my weird brain into some sort of picturesque version of itself. And yeah, but I mean, the actual shooting was we had a team of 5. My wife was helping, kind of organizing, keeping people in schedule. My managers were kind of helping keep track of, like, when people are getting fed, and and then Garrett was the main video operator. But we also had a couple of people running grip, and there, it was 2 days. One for the big shots at the Moore Theater in Seattle, and then the dance video with the tango dance couple that was at the Century Ballroom. And yeah, we had maybe like 3 or 4 takes, and they nailed it. So it was, and then, like, the actual editing, coloring, and all the everything after the fact probably took about a month, because there was so much raw footage we had, that Garrett had to go through. So but in the end, it was a really fun thing.
Oh, it certainly looks like that. And thank you for going into those details. As our time runs out on us, I don't want to lose the opportunity to ask you about your role as a Grammy trustee. And you represent the Pacific Northwest, correct?
Yes.
I believe that you had shared earlier with me that you have worked with some artists from Hawaii. So could you tell us a little bit about your role as a Grammy trustee, and possibly who some of the folks are in Hawaii you've worked with?
Yeah, absolutely. So for a lot of people, they look at the Grammy Association as just the award show, the Recording Academy. It's the big night. It's the biggest night of music. And I was always drawn to that as a kid. But when I found out what the Recording Academy actually does, I was really enamored with that. They focus on education, advocacy, and really supporting musicians. And for someone like myself, in the work that I do, there's not really an organization, or there's not really a place that I can necessarily call home. The music, like a music union, most of the time they're only focused on civic orchestras and theatrical productions and other stuff. And versus, when I'm working with pop artists and everything else, there's not really a place that organizes and advocates on my behalf. And the Recording Academy was one of those places where I found out that they were doing so much from an advocacy standpoint nationally to protect artists, to protect our copyrights, to protect our way of life. And I needed to be a part of that. I needed to support and do everything I could to be a part of the Academy. So I joined with them in 2010 as just as a normal member, and then I started running for, the Pacific Northwest chapter of the Grammy Association actually includes Hawaii, Alaska, Montana, Washington State, Oregon. It's a huge territory that's covered, and we, there's a board of governors that represent the local chapter, and then I was recently nominated to be a trustee for our chapter, and a trustee is essentially like a state senator. I go to the meetings that we have in Santa Monica with the trustee board, and we deal with everything that the future of the Academy, the future of music, and working with how best we can support musicians. And one of the biggest things is Music Cares, is a sister organization of the Recording Academy that, when the pandemic first came, a lot of musicians were out of work and they had no money incoming, and Music Cares was this amazing lifeline for a lot of musicians. It immediately got them money. It got them mental health services. So for me, like I think that their services are absolutely invaluable. So as a trustee, my main focus is actually artist advocacy, because I feel like, as creatives, creativity is seen as kind of a not a realistic endeavor. A lot of people are like, well, if you're going to be a creative, you're going to need a plan B. You're going to need to be a doctor. You're going to need to do this, or you're going to have a job. And I've always been of the mindset that if you really go after music, or if you go after a creative career, you need to be supported, and you need to be able to have the ability to really make a viable living off of it, and I think there's such a stigma, with people in regards to what it means to be a musician. It's funny, I still have times where I feel weird telling someone that I'm a musician, because I'm worried about what they're going to think of me. So, but the work that I do with the Recording Academy, I feel very proud, and very, it makes me feel like we need the respect, and we need to actually be given the due room to understand that music and the arts are actually viable, real careers. And then so recently I was appointed as co-chair of national advocacy with the Recording Academy, along with Yolanda Adams. So, coming up, going to be working, with the Washington, D.C. chapter of the Recording Academy in their office on national policy and lobbying, state senators and representatives on how to protect the arts, how better to, support musicians in the music industry. So, with all that said, as you were asking what Hawaiian artists I've worked with. So on the board, I've had the immense pleasure of serving with Kimie Minor and like Jody Brotman of Palm Records. I've worked with both of them on many, many occasions on programming, education, stuff that we offer to, our membership in the Pacific Northwest. And so I'm pretty excited about what the Recording Academy does. So,
well, I think folks are pretty excited to know that you're there serving as an advocate, and I think you've sensitized me. I've noticed, as I've just recently listening to a pop piece on the radio in my car, I realized that I had listened to the song many, many times before, but I didn't realize how much what the role of the strings were in the background. And it's a result of reading and watching and learning about you that I'm now sensitized. I listen to a piece of music in the car, and if it doesn't have strings, I'm thinking, what's wrong with you? Why haven't you added the strings to it? So it's been a real, true pleasure. Before we close, I want to make sure, I think it's really important to let our viewers know that they really need to do a little search on you, because you have a lot of information up there that's available to the public. And So I think they'd also enjoy seeing some of you have a pop reel and a film reel, and that shows some of the scoring you've done. So with that, thank you, Andrew Joslyn. And you've been watching to tell our viewers, just to remind you, you've been watching The Creative Life, and today's guest was Andrew Joslyn, guest extraordinaire, and I invite you to join us again in 2 weeks as we continue to bring you our stream of individuals demonstrating their passion for living the creative life as you do, Andrew. Thank you again, and aloha.